The current U.S. immigration systems and policies do not work.
If you can even call them policies.
The American Religious Town Hall meeting is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here is your host and moderator.
Welcome, viewers. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Andrea Luxton. I'm the president of Andrews University in Berrien Springs, Michigan, and I am today's moderator. We have a very important topic for today, but before we get into that, I'd like you to meet our panelists.
I'm Tom Plumley. I'm a minister in the Christian Church, Disciples of Christ, and I serve at First Christian Church in Fort Worth, Texas.
I'm Dan Levin. I serve as senior rabbi at Temple Bethel in Boca Raton, Florida.
Hi, I'm Carl Trovall. I'm professor of ethics and history at Concordia University in Austin, Texas.
My name is Mel Robeck. I'm Senior Professor of Church History and Ecumenics and Special Assistant to the President for Ecumenical Relations at Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena, California. I am also an ordained minister of the Assemblies of God.
Thank you very much to our panelists, and now to today's topic. At the end of summer, the news carried considerable news about immigration. It reported that over 2 million migrants had been arrested at the border in the previous 11 months. One national leader, however, declared the border is secure, but clearly that is not the case. Charges that we are experiencing an invasion, that those who are fighting to impede migration are simply bigots, that the governors of Texas and Florida are engaged in stunts at the expense of human lives, and that New York City is faced with a humanitarian crisis with the influx of bus migrants, as though border states were not, fill the airwaves. In the end, all of this amounts to mere finger-pointing, in which both Republicans and Democrats demonstrate their failure to act, it would seem, for the common good. It appears that the U.S. needs an immigration policy, and that it needs it now. Given the current stalemate in Congress, we wonder what our panelists think about the subject. So we've invited them to respond to the following questions. Does the U.S. have an immigration problem? In fact, does the U.S. have an immigration policy? And if so, what is it? Do you know what it is? And if you were responsible for developing a new immigration policy, what would you put into it? And finally, what can faith communities do to help break the current congressional impasse and contribute to the development of a fair and equitable policy? Well, we're going to solve all the problems today. So we'll go back to those who introduced the topic. Bye-bye.
In the Torah, the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, the Torah commands us to love and care for the stranger 36 different times. There are more quotations than I could count to remind us that it is our moral obligation to take care of the stranger, to take care of the person who is not from there, and to treat that person with dignity and with respect and with humanity, no different than that we would give to another citizen. At the same time, there's plenty in Hebrew Scriptures that tells us, and in Jewish law it says it is our obligation, not just our right, but our obligation to guard our borders and to ensure that we protect ourselves from invasion or from threat. How you balance those two competing moral obligations is really, really complicated. But just because something is complicated does not mean that it is also not morally urgent. And unfortunately, the complication in our society, I think, has given us permission to kick it further and further down the road. One of the things that I'll never forget is that I think it was 10 years ago or somewhere in that neighborhood, there was a bipartisan compromise around immigration policy. And then when it came to a vote on the Senate floor, people who actually formulated the policy voted against their own policy because of partisan pressures. This is a really, really serious problem because individual lives are at stake. We talk about numbers like 1 million or 2 million people who come to the border in a particular year, and we forget those are individuals. And if you think about what it takes to get to the border, to try to ask for asylum or immigration, what is accomplished by those people just to get to Tijuana or to somewhere else to apply for that status is mind-blowing. I remember I was privileged to visit a facility run by Jewish Family Services in San Diego that tries to help migrants after they clear immigration and then have a period of time before their hearing. They try to provide support for those individuals. I met a family that was coming from St. Petersburg. They had fled some of the violence in Russia, and because the father of this family had said things that Vladimir Putin didn't find to be particularly complimentary, they had to run. In order to run, they had to go from St. Petersburg to Tajikistan, to Istanbul, to Mexico City, and then to try to apply for asylum at the U.S. border. What we forget, I think, is how important it is to treat these individuals with some semblance of efficiency, but also humanity. And one of the things that I think we have done in America is by making this such a partisan issue, instead of saying, let's work together to craft something that allows America to honor its history of immigration. On one side of my family, my dad's family came here before the Civil War as immigrants. And my mother came as an immigrant from Canada in 1963. So there's a difference in how we all get here. But looking around the table, none of us are Native Americans. And so we have to honor that history and recognize that America's strength is found in the diversity of peoples and cultures who have come to the United States and to try to stake their claim to the American dream. But finding a way to do this that not only honors the rule of law, but at the same time honors the humanity of an immigrant is something that I think we have to be really diligent in trying to fashion.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Well put, Dan. I really appreciate what you had to say, and I wholeheartedly concur with everything that you've said. I want to talk a little bit about the incoherent policy that we have in immigration in the United States. I know from talking to immigration lawyers that the American immigration legal system, the laws, are next to taxation. They're the most complex laws that we have in our country. They are sometimes contradictory. People come in. We categorize people in different ways, but it depends upon what judge hears it, on what particular evidence is used in a particular court, when people have their hearings, if they get a hearing that's fair. And I'm not suggesting that some don't get fair hearings, but we need to have distinctions about who's a refugee, who's an asylee, who's coming at what level for what sort of purpose into the United States. So we need to rehaul the legal codes. We need a clear process for becoming a citizen and what the steps are. I mean, a lot of times you hear the line, well, I wish people would just get in line, right? And then we could process people legally. The problem is that there really isn't a very clear line because there's so many different ways to come into the United States. In fact, I think we've talked about it on the program, but the number one group of people who are here in an undocumented way tend to be people who fly in and are here as students and then just stay here. We often think of our border as the crisis, and yet we have a whole bunch of people coming in these other ways. And all I'm laying out is that we have a large country and a very complex system, and I couldn't agree more, Dan, that the Republicans and Democrats need to think about our common good rather than their own partisan goals. In fact, traditionally, Republicans and Democrats that never divided evenly between them because you tended to have people who were pro-Republican conservatives who wanted open borders for cheap labor cheaper labor for businesses, and you had social justice Democrats all on one side of the immigration wanting more open borders, and you tended to have labor Democrats and law and order Republicans on the other side. So it's really, even within the parties, there's disagreement about what to do. So
Tom.
Well, I guess I want to look at the good things about the system that we do have, and not infer that there is no policy. It is. It's complicated, and we need to say to the politicians, a pox on both your houses, because we need to create something new, and that's not going to happen if y'all continue to just do nothing more than call names. I don't want to hear another politician talk about immigration unless they're talking about a solution to it, and you know, shutting off the border is not a solution, because nobody really wants that. Nobody really wants absolute walls around this country, because as the current, what policy we do have is built on students, is built on the need for skilled labor, is built for the need on the need of sometimes people to do things that American citizens can't find enough American citizens to do. It often involves reuniting families that have been split up for any of a dozen reasons, and promoting diversity within our own country. That has often been a value that our immigration policy has sought to further. So not everything about what we currently have is bad, but the politicization of it and the refusal to fix the things that need to be fixed, that is a problem.
Right. Thank you.
Yes. The first question was, does the U.S. have an immigration problem? And I would have to say, yes, absolutely, it has an immigration problem. The second question was, does the U.S. have an immigration policy? And if so, what is it? And what you've said already is basically, we have multiple immigration policies, and sometimes they work against one another. And we certainly don't have an immigration policy that is fully integrated. Otherwise, we wouldn't have these kinds of problems. If you were responsible for developing a new immigration policy, what would you put into it? I'm not sure I know what I would put into it. I know I would pull certain things out of it. The last time our government as a nation looked at immigration policy was 1986. It's almost 4 decades ago. And at that time, we set a limit of 675,000 people a year. That seems pretty generous. But when you're talking about 1 million or 2 million at our borders at any one time, you have to say, how do we face this? What do we do with this? We just hire a whole bunch more people? Do we drop the quota? Do we put up higher borders? I don't know. I don't think that those are appropriate things to work with. I think that we have to get our heads together and say, we want to handle this issue, and we can no longer afford to make it a political issue. It's a national survival issue. Our current policy does allow for U.S. citizens who marry non-citizens to bring those people in, and to bring in families, and to bring in parents, and so we have these kind of things where people can climb on the backs of others. But where do they fit? Do they fit in that 675,000, or are they extras? They're free. And when you have so many people, it's really hard to make clear. why do we usually have immigration policy? In part, is to protect American workers and wages. That's the theory behind immigration policy. You don't want to have too many, you don't want to have too few, and you don't want to have them at certain levels. But I do think that people come here for good reasons, and this is still the best place to immigrate in any place in the world, as far as I'm concerned.
So with all this in mind, where do our faith communities come into it, or is this a political issue and not an issue related to our communities?
Well, I think part of the place where faith communities have a role to play is by delineating where are the moral boundaries in which those political decisions should be made. Mm-hmm. So, for example, we in the religious community need to talk about the scourge of xenophobia and about how morally damaging it can be to practice that kind of discrimination. Because part of what we saw in recent years was that because of a fear of foreigners, because of a fear of what immigration might produce, we actually adopted a policy where we deliberately separated children from their parents with no capacity to ensure that those children would be returned to their families. The moral insult and sin of that policy is hard to quantify. And at the same time, the idea that we need to have an efficient, fair, safe way to ensure that the people who are given the gift of a green card and the capacity to come to this country to live and to work are people who want to be part of the American dream and are not going to be a threat to our society is important. But at the same time, I think we also have something to say about what is our nation actually capable of and what is our moral responsibility as a nation. The war in Ukraine beginning last February created more than 5 million refugees. America didn't take 50,000. So when you think about much, much smaller, poorer countries who are absorbing hundreds of thousands of refugees, like Poland, and the poorest country in Europe, Moldova, and then you take a look at what the United States, one of the richest nations on the planet, our policy was, I think, a moral failure, given the needs of those desperate people who are fleeing from a war they did not invite. And so I think that there are moral questions to be applied to the political discussions that we need to attend to.
Thank you. Tom, you had some comments too.
But once again, as every time we do that, every time we open our mouths in that regard, we open ourselves up to being criticized as coming down on one side of the political fence or the other. And we have to bring into our communities the opportunity for conversation and then speak from that conversation so that we can avoid some of that partisanship.
I think one thing I also add is sometimes we punish the wrong people just because we're so blinded by our own fears. So recently, there was a group of migrants that Governor DeSantis from Florida sent, not from Florida, but from Texas to Martha's Vineyard because they were seen to be here illegally. They weren't here illegally. They were applying for asylum and refugee status. Where were they coming from? Venezuela. Why were they fleeing Venezuela? They were fleeing Venezuela because they didn't believe in the socialist government that has destroyed that country. They believed in the freedoms and the capitalist society that America champions. So the people that we are denigrating as immigrants are precisely the kind of people who want to be a part of the way of life that we have tried to teach the world is the better way to live. So I think we have to be also very careful about how we talk about immigrants because they are a very complex, diverse group of people.
Right.
So are we saying that really the somehow we're not going to solve this until we can take it outside the political arena?
Well, and that's why we need to. And I think we can be leaders in this, in standing up and saying that neither party has it right, both parties have it wrong, and we don't have an answer, but we can create a conversational space in which answers can be arrived at.
I was going to say, I think the other piece is that wherever the United States gets themselves involved in the world and create, for whatever policy they're creating, whether it's Central American policy, standing with one government or another government, what you do is you create, by our meddling, we create all kinds of refugees and chaos, which we end up, those people end up coming to us for help. I'm just saying that where the U.S. extends its monetary, economic, financial, military influence, we are going to get refugees from those areas of the world.
Great, thank you. Let's have a break.
We hope you're enjoying today's program. If you'd like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the vision and history of the program, and we invite you to become a ministry partner, explore our Town Hall Estates healthcare facilities, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, we look forward to receiving your letters. You may write us at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. If you have a prayer request, please send it to prayerrequest@americanreligious.org. Thank you for writing and thank you for watching. Now, back to today's closing statements.
Yes, viewers, thank you for watching, and thank you for being part of our show, part by not just watching us, but responding and sharing your ideas with us. We do value that greatly. And we've discovered that we are discussing about a very complex topic today, so we're going to go to our final conclusions and sort everything out. Tom.
Thank you. I'm not sure I'm going to sort it all out, but I do think a couple things need to be said. That we need to increase the efficiency of the system that we're in, because people get treated inhumanely because of the inefficiency of the way that they are welcomed, that they are housed, that they have to appear in court, and all of that is too inefficient, and we need to do something to increase efficiency there, and we need to create a system that more rapidly responds to the labor needs of this nation, and we need to create some system by which those who have come here illegally in the past or have been brought here illegally as children can earn the right to remain here legally.
Thank you.
I have four just brief things. They're extensive in their own right, but I mean, number one, which we've talked about, is humanizing the immigrant, to realize these are not numbers, these are people. I mean, I think if we can keep our eye on empathizing with what's going on, which is connected with my second piece, and that is to educate oneself. It's complex, and it takes a long time to educate oneself about this issue. And to do that. Third, if you can find a place in your church body, an organization, Lutherans have Lutheran Immigration Refugee Services, but I know Catholics have, Jewish community has it as well, and others support those organizations because they both educate as well as do human social service to help immigrants. And then I guess the last would be to be politically involved and vote for people who are supportive of a comprehensive immigration policy.
Thank you.
I can tell you this, presidential executive orders is not the way to do immigration policy. And both the Biden administration and the Trump administration have tried that, and both, as far as I'm concerned, are failures in getting anything done. Because the courts, again, move in, and there are all kinds of issues that related to presidential executive orders. I do think that you're absolutely right, Tom, that we really need to find a more comprehensive way. We need to find an easier way. We still have 2.7 million dreamers in this country that are really, in a sense, stateless. They don't know the language of the countries from which they come. They were not here, did not usually come here voluntarily. They were brought here by their parents, or they were sent by their parents. and they're stuck here, and we won't take care of them. And I do not understand why they cannot have a place in our citizenry. I think we need to find a way to do that, and I think that we have to be hard on our politicians, and as you put it, we need to vote for people who will do the kinds of things that are necessary for us to have an immigration policy that actually works.
The obligation to take care of the stranger is not to be borne by people who happen to live on states where there is a border. And I think we need to create a policy in the United States that says it is our collective responsibility as Americans to welcome, to house, to treat, to take care of, and if necessary, to return back home those whom we cannot accommodate, and to do so in a way that is humane and compassionate. On the base of the Statue of Liberty, it says, "Give me your tired and your poor." But one of the things that makes America great is our amazing university system. We train all these incredible, talented engineers and entrepreneurs, and then because of our broken immigration system, we send them home to another country to compete against us, as opposed to saying, welcome, build your business here, build your idea here. There is so much more that we could be doing as a country if we would just follow the moral teachings of our tradition. They lead us in the right direction.
Thank you very much. I think the one thing we all totally agree on is that this is complicated. I was intrigued by a comment made a little bit earlier, I think by you, Carl, about we drive policies in our foreign policy, and as a result, we end up with immigration challenges as a result of that, and sometimes we're not willing to take responsibility for that. And it seems as though that you know, and I would not want to be in politics and answer all these questions, but that balance between expediency and doing what's best for a country on one hand, and the moral nature of government on the other. And it seems to me that this falls into the moral nature of government. And I think, isn't that what we should have in the United States, is a moral government? That's important, it seems like. All right, thank you. The Charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy, and the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America we believe in civil and religious freedom, not only in theory, but in reality. And so now, friends, until next week at the same time and over the very same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. And may the God of all of us bless all of you.